Good afternoon, everybody. On this Hump Day, Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025, I've got all of your stories for your rush hour ride home, and we have a ton to get into as we have breaking news with the Diddy Trial. He's been found guilty of 2 of the 5 charges. I'll explain what those were. Not the more serious ones. I guess he was let off the hook in some ways. We'll talk to Rachel Juarez from Hot Bench. She's going to call in and let us know her sort of hot takes regarding this big trial, kind of one of the biggest entertainment news trials out there. Of course, now that it went to trial, Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni hasn't gone there yet. Will it? We'll have to see. We're covering many different celebrity trials, but Mel Owens has been put on trial by the public, that is. He is the Golden Bachelor, or shall I say, was the Golden Bachelor. I'll share what Reality Steve has to say about how he may have been canned. And speaking of getting canned, the American public is getting canned by this big, beautiful bill. And we hear from AOC as she shares her thoughts, never want to shy away from sharing her opinion on the bill that is really, they're saying it's like the worst bill that's ever gone through the government. And even Trump can't articulate how many people will lose their health insurance. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. We'll be here to call it out. All these stories and more starts right now on The Rush. Well, how is this for a breaking story? We'll get to the Diddy stuff in a second, but Reality Steve just posted this. I'm hearing that Mel Owens is out as the Golden Bachelor due to recent negative publicity surrounding his June 4th podcast appearance. Expect an announcement soon, including who is going to replace him. Haven't heard a name yet on who that is. We'll update if when I hear. Hey, let's get Reality Steve to replace him. You're not golden age yet, but you just turned 50. Why not? Here was Claire and Emma's podcast. They shared this clip. Several weeks after it came out. It didn't really make big news as no one heard it its first go around, but here's what he had to say that may have led to his firing.
Lined up until they get out of the limo.
Okay.
But they ask me, like, what's your preferences? So I just said 45 to 60. just
There it is. I mean, and he said some other things like, well, I'm going to cut anybody who's over the age of 60. I don't want women with wigs and artificial hips. It's like, first of all, Mel Owens, is that his name? Mel, whatever his name is. He played in the NFL. He knows a thing or two about artificial hips. But either way, maybe he's not right for the show, right? And good on the producers for saying, you know what, we literally can't move forward. Our audience is 90% women. And the one thing we all have in common is we're all getting older and nobody wants to have someone so blatantly, talk about age so flippantly like that. Like, why not talk about, them for all their other aspects? No, love certainly might not be blind, but it's not the whole, but attraction comes in other forms. And maybe Mel, maybe there's a reason he's single. How about that? All right. Good luck to you out there. Well, Diddy was found guilty on 2 of 5 counts in his sex trafficking trial. This here shared on a nice infographic on our Instagram. Don't forget to give us a follow on Instagram, The Rush Hour with Dave Neal and D Neals. That's where I post my stand-up show updates, clips, and things like that. So if you want to comment on this story and others that we cover here on the podcast, this is the best place you can do it. So what were the 2 counts that he was found guilty of? Well, count 1, racketeering conspiracy, not guilty. Count 2, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, not guilty. Count 3, transportation to engage in prostitution, guilty. Count 4, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, not guilty. Count 5, transportation to engage in prostitution, guilty. So as far as I can tell, the things he has been found guilty for, if it's, and I'll love to talk to Rachel more about this, because if it's just driving, like, are they saying he's guilty because he was transporting a prostitute? Now, I personally believe that sex work should be legal and safe. You know what I mean? If it's legal, you can have better sort of ways to police it and make sure people are safe. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But again, let's find out what an actual professional thinks. Let's talk to Rachel Juarez. Today's episode is sponsored by ZocDoc. As I get older, I keep thinking I should be going to the doctor more. You know, to deal with things like sleep trouble, neck pain, anxiety from doom scrolling on TikTok. But it can be tough to get to the doctor. I want to keep myself healthy, but the system makes it impossible to find the right guy for my needs. Until I found ZocDoc, they make it so easy to find the right fit and book an appointment fast directly on their website. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare prefer high-quality, in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. Appointments made through ZocDoc also happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/rush hour to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/rush hour. ZocDoc.com/rush hour. Now back to the show. All right, without further ado, let's talk to an expert. We're bringing in Rachel Juarez to cover the big Diddy trial. You told me off air you were blown away. Why?
I'm really surprised they didn't convict him of the sex trafficking charges. I think I was not surprised that they acquitted him of the RICO charges, the criminal enterprise charge, but I'm very, very surprised they did not find sex trafficking.
By the way, I love that you're in your robe as we speak right now.
Oh, yes, this is like behind the robe, right? Yes, during lunch.
Rachel Juarez, of course, a judge on hot bench here, so we have her on her lunch break. We know you're a true legal nerd if you're going to take time on your lunch break to keep talking law.
I mean, we were the judges. We were taking all our breaks on the bench to fawn over the Diddy trial. One of the other judges and I went live in the break between two cases just to do a little quick thing because we were all pretty shocked.
So tell me why you thought he would have been found guilty of the sex trafficking.
Right. So the big difference between the Mann Act violations, which they did find him guilty of, which is interstate travel. It's basically transporting individuals between states to engage in prostitution, in this case, or it can be other improper, immoral behavior. That doesn't require any coercion. It's just transporting someone across state lines for the purposes of prostitution is a violation of the Mann Act. The big difference between the Mann Act and sex trafficking is that sex trafficking requires some element of coercion, force, duress. And particularly with respect to Cassie, I think the second victim, the Jane Doe victim, was a lot more questionable. But particularly with respect to Cassie, that's why the video of what happened in the hotel was relevant. That's why a lot of the evidence of how abusive he was to her, the fact that he extorted her mother, for money for a video of Cassie. That's why that stuff was relevant, to show that even if Cassie might have voluntarily engaged in some of the behavior, she was being coerced on at least some occasions to engage in the sex acts that she was being transported across state lines to engage in. And I'm very surprised that the jury could not understand that simply because she wasn't being beaten on her way across the state line, that there wasn't some coercion going on, given all the other things he was doing to her, physical assault, extortion, things like that.
Well, do they do they differentiate between physical coercion and, say, financial, like if someone's livelihood is dependent on them,
So the issue of financial livelihood dependence might be a tougher call, but in terms of coercion, it doesn't have to be physical coercion, but there does have to be some, that it's similar to the issue of consent when you're talking about sex acts, not identical, but similar in the sense of, if somebody can give you a job in exchange for a sex act, is that force and coercion? People could differ about that. If someone beats you to engage in a sex act, that's obviously coercion. It's obviously not consent. So it kind of falls somewhere in the middle when you're talking about things like extortion. I think if it was just an issue of her career wouldn't have been as good if she hadn't done that, I don't think that would probably suffice as coercion.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about the prosecution, and I'm not an expert on this, obviously, but the prosecution almost outpunting their coverage, going for things that were too hard to prove. Was there another scenario where they could have gone for maybe lesser crimes that they could have got him on? Or was it kind of this is all they had to go off of?
So it's an interesting question because one of the things that they did do with respect to the RICO charge was they included a lot of things that were predicate acts under the RICO statute. In order to prove a RICO charge, you have to prove it's similar to conspiracy. It's a type of conspiracy in that you have to prove distinct underlying acts. And we know that the jury was interested in those yesterday because they were asking questions like, if someone asks you for drugs and you give them to them, are you a drug distributor? And the only reason to ask that in this case is if you're looking at the predicate acts under RICO. And my guess would be they didn't find enough evidence of those underlying acts, which are smaller crimes, drug-related things, to even find a RICO violation. So it may very well be that even if they had included some of the smaller charges, the jury here just didn't buy it.
So what comes next? The sentencing? How long will it be? Time served, or is this going to be a year or two?
So the maximum sentence for the Mann Act violations is 10 years per violation. Theoretically, those can be consecutive or concurrent. But the immediate thing I think that comes next is deciding whether he gets out pending sentencing. And that decision is going to be made today. So basically what the judge has done is asked both sides to submit a letter brief, something informal, by 1:00, so in 30 minutes from now, to argue whether or not Diddy should be released on bond pending sentencing. And he obviously was not allowed. He initially was way back when, but for most of the time pending trial, he's been in jail, both because of the seriousness of his crimes, but also in large part, or his alleged crimes, some of which he's now been acquitted of. But the other reason was witness intimidation. They found that he was reaching out to witnesses and attempting to coerce witnesses while the prosecution was ongoing. So now what they're going to argue about is, should he be allowed to be out of jail now that he's not facing the more serious charges while he awaits sentencing? And this is going to be a very interesting decision. There's no absolute correct answer to that. It's very much within the judge's discretion. However, under the circumstances, he's facing prostitution charges, which, are not violent crimes. They're just, what he's been found guilty of are not violent crimes. They don't have him facing life sentence or anything like that. I think if Diddy were not Diddy, I think if he were just a normal rich guy, it would be very hard to justify keeping him in jail while he awaits sentencing. But I don't know what the judge will do here. There are issues of, witness intimidation, although I don't think they're so relevant anymore. And he's got the public watching him. And although that's not supposed to matter so much, you kind of can't help but have it matter a little. So we should find that out this afternoon. And then he'll either be in jail or he'll be released on bond. And if he's released on bond, there will be lots of conditions. Can't leave your home, ankle monitor. Probably he'll have to pay for private security to make sure he doesn't leave his home. Take away his passport, remove his access to any private jets, things like that, so that he can't flee. But then he'll either await sentencing in jail or, with an ankle monitor at home.
Yeah, look, I'm all for people overcoming their issues and moving on with their life. But if you watch that video of him beating Cassie, I mean, it's just you're kind of dead in my world. But that was already settled, right? Cassie was paid out millions and
civilly.
Civilly. So that's kind of all solved. Is there anything else that's going to be looked at as far as the hotel that kind of conspired to keep this thing from going public, or is this just going to be, is this over? Are we done with Diddy?
I don't think we're done with Diddy. I think Diddy's going to see a lot more civil lawsuits. I don't know what possibilities there might be for other prosecutions in other jurisdictions. This was the big one, the federal prosecution. He could face other charges in other jurisdictions. That's possible. I don't think we're going to see any criminal action against the hotel. I know there was a civil lawsuit against the hotel that was settled, but I think this is the big one in terms of criminal liability for him. I don't know that there's much grounds for appeal here. It's much harder to appeal something when you have a jury verdict. Not impossible, but much harder than when you have a judge, like in the Laura Owens case, making a decision all by themselves. There are more grounds for appeal. It's harder to appeal a jury verdict. But I think we're going to see a lot more civil lawsuits against him. But I don't think this man is going to spend the rest of his life in jail, which I think is shocking to a lot of us. And that's why it's because of that video and that kind of conduct that I'm surprised that the jury did not believe that anything he did in transporting Cassie or anyone else had no element of coercion. I mean, clearly she was subjected to physical force at some point. How could she not be afraid of him?
Us normal people, we look to folks like you who follow this closely to get your reaction because I'm like, I don't know, like, did they get them on the right things? Like, when it comes to it, like, my general belief with prostitution is I think it should be legalized. I think it should be safe for all people involved. If people want to do with their body whatever they want, go for it. Now, so it seems like the issue is just whether or not because he was moving prostitutes, right? That's kind of what the issue was. That's
why it's a federal crime. Yeah, that's why it's a federal crime. It's the transportation across state lines. Otherwise, prostitution is regulated by the states, which is why you have it legal in some states and not legal in others, right? It's why you have some places like Nevada where there's some amount of sex work that's allowed, other states where there isn't sex work allowed. It's the interstate transportation. It's similar to things like wire fraud when it crosses state lines.
Right. Wouldn't legalizing prostitution prevent a lot of this because everything's done in the dark that you don't know? It's almost like if the drug trade goes away when you can just go buy marijuana, right? Doesn't it solve some of these issues?
I mean, that's the argument for legalizing it. Yeah. It's the argument for legalizing a lot of drugs. It's the argument for legalizing sex work. It's that the sex workers would not be subject to danger. It would not come with so much other criminal activity if it didn't have to occur in the dark. If it could be properly regulated above board with protections in place, that it would be a safer and, it wouldn't be have the negative things associated with it because it wouldn't be illegal to begin with. So it could just take place out in the open. That's the main argument for legalizing it.
Well, how about this transition from sex working to Laura Owens? She blew a guy twice and then faked a pregnancy. Have you seen that Rachel Mitchell, the county prosecutor, now says there's an accomplice? Have you seen that?
Yes, I did see that. It's an aggravating factor. Yeah.
What is that all about? I mean, is this juice? This is getting juicy.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be mom, right? Who else could it be?
I'm hoping her lawyer, but I think it's just mom. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be theoretically her sister if she provided her with the ultrasound. That's the other thing I was thinking about. I know she used some of her sister's images. If they have some evidence that the sister provided them to Laura for the use or for the purpose of using them to fool these men, that would be another very clear way to establish it. But my guess is it's mom.
And that would be so proof because when you're pregnant, you just shoot off your ultrasound to everybody,
Absolutely. They would have to have some type of evidence in the form of, because they seized a lot of electronic devices. They'd have to have so much evidence, or not so much, but they'd have to have clear evidence in the form of communication saying, hey, can I borrow your sonogram so that I can try to trick Clayton? Sure, here it is. Yeah, sending the sonogram isn't enough.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm with you that I think it's the mom, and which, by the way, the mom, their big claim to fame is that she won a Peabody. So I'm hoping that the Justice for Clayton community can win a Peabody award covering this as a way to just dunk it on her. But what is that? Rachel Mitchell just dropping this bomb that there might be a conspirator and all these other things. Is this like their final attempt to get a plea deal?
So this is an allegation, and that's the other thing I was going to say. It could be that they really don't have proof of an accomplice yet. This is a charging document that is alleging aggravating factors, which could be relevant, some of which the jury has to find in terms of sentencing. And there are rules in Arizona. I don't know the specific rules to when you have to plead them, when you have to disclose them. It could also be that they think there might be an accomplice, but can't prove it yet. And they have to allege it at this point. Otherwise, they haven't given proper notice of it. I don't know if they're up against deadlines for alleging aggravating factors, but it's certainly, yes, to put pressure on Laura for the purposes of settlement or a plea bargain. But it's also something they no doubt legally have to do at some point.
It's wild stuff. I mean, it's a lot. I'm not a legal person, but we got a lot of different trials flying out.
I mean, Koberger's pleading guilty. I mean, that's the other one, right?
And that seems to be the victims seem to be upset because they know he's guilty and they want a jury to kind of come to that conclusion. But
they want to see him put to death, I think, is what they want.
Is that? Yeah. I mean, I
think so.
Should this have gone to trial?
Look, no, is the sad answer. I understand how, and my understanding is it's one victim's family. I feel that the prosecution should have very strongly taken into account the victim's family's positions on this. I don't know the extent of all of their positions, but there are other reasons, state resources, things like that, to not go through the time and expense of a large jury trial when he's willing to plead to life in prison. The other thing I've been seeing from a lot of people is anger that we're now not going to know why he did it. But we were never going to know why he did it anyway. He wasn't going to take the stand and tell us why he did it. He would not have testified. And if he did testify, he was going to deny doing it. And he wouldn't have written the OJ book, Why I Might Have Done It, right?
Yeah, I think that's what people. It kind of comes all these trials, the sort of psychology of audience, kind of like in a gladiator sport with Baldoni, with the defamation lawsuit getting dismissed and then him not amending it. People were upset because they want this conclusion, and I guess we just don't always get it in the legal system.
Yeah, and look, Brian Koberger is going to spend the rest of his life in jail, and I think I understand why the reaction to that is that it's insufficient to some people. But anything less than pleading guilty, accepting responsibility, admitting to his crimes, and spending the rest of his life in jail would have been inadequate. There's no doubt. But it's hard to fault the prosecution for accepting a plea deal under all the circumstances that just takes the death penalty off the table. But I don't know how all the victims' families felt about it. I don't know if they properly discussed it with them, so I can't really say.
Well, we appreciate all of your expert opinions, and I thank you for taking time during lunch break of Hot Benches.
Of course.
To chat with us. Again, you're welcome anytime. Anything we can promote for you on your end?
No, just watch Hot Bench, check your local listings, and we are premiering season 12 in the fall.
All right, there it is. Rachel Juarez, everybody. Thanks again.
Bye. Thanks, Dave.
All right, let's move it on to some other things we've got going on. One is Alcatraz Island. Kevin Guthrie, executive director of the Florida Division of Emergency Management, says that Alligator Alcatraz will have a staff village to house over 1,000 workers. Now, there's a lot of comments, calling out how quickly they were able to get the funds and put everything together in order to have essentially internment camps. Some are calling them concentration camps. But it's like, where is this sort of effort and energy to house the homeless, to house our veterans, to take care of our own people? Like, they've got all of this money to try to process people and put them in this, because it's like Hollywood to them. There's alligators. We're going to throw some piranhas in there, strap some, guns to the alligators' tails while you're at it. Like, what are they doing? Have a listen.
Power supply is fully redundant with backup generators in place. We've put a staff village here on site with a capacity of 1,000. Our services are hot meal 3 times a day, 24/7 medical facility, pharmacy, air conditioning, access to indoor and outdoor rec yards, legal and clergy support service.
But I need to know, will the inmates have access to Donald Trump's new cologne? Like, I need to know, will there be a merchandise store where they can buy MAGA as they're being kicked out? I need to know. And by the way, if you search Alcatraz, let's go, what's it called? Alligator Alcatraz. Flood, you're already going to say, look at this. They're like, it's the best. It's the best. We've never had a better alligator-associated prison system. Well, opening ready for a hurricane, but not a summer shower. So it's already flooded here. They're showing the different huge setback for Trump with Alligator Alcatraz already flooding. So, yeah, I mean, there it is. They got it all. Now, can we just get some rubber socks so we don't have any floods we need to deal with? But again, now we've got alligators. Essentially, I guess they're able to swim into the gates. It's kind of like a reverse zoo thing happening here. You thought you liked Tiger King. Well, what if we're in the cages and then the animals roam free? It's a real win for wildlife, if you ask me. And speaking of a win for wildlife, how's this for this insane person that we have running what is she running? Kristi Noem. She's the who cares? Have a listen.
Today I was talking to some marshals that have been partnering with ICE. They said that they had detained a cannibal and put him on a plane to take him home. And while they had him in his seat, he started to eat himself.
There it is. Cannibals be eating themselves. You thought they were hungry for your cats and your dogs. They be eating themselves now. Why does Kristi Noem sound like an old actress from the 20s? Didn't she have that?
And they had to get him off and get him medical attention. These are the kind of deranged individuals that are on our streets in America that we're trying to target and get out of our country because they are so deranged they don't belong here.
They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats and dogs. They're eating their own fingers. Trump doesn't know how many Americans will lose health care under his own budget.
And just to be clear on the Medicaid cuts, you've promised not to cut Medicaid, said this is all just targeting waste, fraud, and abuse. Are you saying that the estimated 11.8 million people who could lose their health coverage, that is all waste, fraud, and abuse?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's going to be a very much smaller number than that, and that number will be waste, fraud, and abuse. And if you look, they took a much more liberal stance on the Medicaid situation than they could have. They had a tough stance and a weak stance. They took not a very strong stance on that to start off, and it's waste, fraud, and abuse, and everybody wants that covered.
What number is that? What analysis are you seeing?
I'm not seeing a number, but I know it's much less than the number you gave.
There it is. It's, hey guys, don't worry. Grandma, she's going to die. It's waste, fraud, and abuse. Don't have money for food stamps for that young single mom. Don't worry about it. It's waste, fraud, and abuse. If it couldn't get any lower, trust me, it does. Here we have Representative Goldman's asking people to raise their hand if they don't think children with cancer who are American citizens should be deported. Spoiler, 0 Republicans raised their hands, even though this has happened twice now.
Raise your hand if you do not think children with cancer who are American citizens should be deported.
I don't think they should be deported. Do not think? It's kind of a tough question.
Looks like it's all the Democrats and none of the Republicans.
There it is. All right. And that's not the only one we have. AOC says, do the math. This bill is a deal with the devil. You should be ashamed. The problem is it's like shame has been taken out of the equation. You used to be able to shame people. Now we just need to vote, right? We need to vote out every single person who passes this bill. And I hate to tell you this, if you're voting after your congressman passed this bill, that's going to rob, take away your health care. It's going to take away your food stamps if you need them, if you fall sick, or if AI takes over your job and you can't work. If after all of that, you're still voting for these people, that's on you, sister.
On this point of tax on tips, as one of the only people in this body who has lived off of tips, I want to tell you a little bit about the scam of that tax, a little bit of the fine print there. The cap on that is $25,000. While you're jacking up taxes on people who make less than $50,000 across the United States, while taking away their SNAP, while taking away their Medicaid, while kicking them off of the ACA and their health care extensions. So if you're at home and you're living off tips, you do the math.
There it is. You do the math, she says. And again, this bill is only going to allow no tax on those tips for 3 years. So essentially, what the bill does is it's going to look even worse after the midterms, right? They want to make sure that they don't look too bad during the midterms, and then after that, it's going to get even worse. Just remember who's signing this bill. Well, a wild day indeed. If you like this podcast and like what we're doing, I'm trying to give you all that up-to-date hot gossip. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Make sure to share us with your friends. The best way we can grow, especially during these slow summer months, is share us with your friends. Tag us on Instagram. The Rush Hour with Dave Neal, or D-Neals on Instagram, D-Neals on TikTok. Appreciate all you guys. 5-star reviews. Keep them coming. And we'll talk to you in the morning. Until then, I'm Dave, and this is The Rush.